welcome to my kitchen. I want to talk to you today about another way of preserving food, and today we're going to make sauerkraut. Sauerkraut is a fermented food. I like fermenting cabbage because it stays crispy and it gives you some fresh food in the winter when you can't grow it yourself, and it will stay good in the refrigerator. After you fermented it, we'll put it in the refrigerator and it'll stay good for a year or so. So anyway, it's a good thing to put in there and have for winter. Now, it's not season for brassicas here, so I actually bought this cabbage. I always get organic because I don't want to put pesticides in my fermentation. So the first thing we're going to do is remove the outer cabbage leaves, and I'm going to try to keep those intact, and I'll save those and I'll show you why later. We're going to need that. Keep it intact, at least a chunk of it, as best you can. So I'm going to remove that, although this cabbage is actually in really good shape and there's no blemishes on it. But if there were, I would want to take those off and just use fresh cabbage. Now, there are people who say you can use the core when you're fermenting because it goes ahead and ferments and stays fine. But I usually cut the core out for mine. And I'm using a bread knife, which is, been designated, I guess, for bread. But I like the way that it cuts the cabbage, so I'm going to use it. And we're going to shred up the cabbage and try to keep it in uniform shape, uniform size, so that as it ferments, it'll all, some of it won't be soggier or crispier than the other. So I'm just going to cut this up, and it's real easy to slice it. People used to ferment a lot in the old days, and they would ferment in crocks. And that was cool. You can ferment in crocks now, but you would have to find a lid that would work. And when you use the old crocks, when you find them, you really don't find lids for them. I'm going to put this in a plastic bowl because I have not got a stainless steel bowl, but never ferment in plastic. You only want to ferment in glass material. So I will be fermenting today in mason jars. Now there's all kinds of flavors you can put in your sauerkraut to ferment, and you can make it spicy. I have several flavors on my counter here that I have going. The first one that I made for this season was crushed red pepper, and I added crushed red peppers and garlic to it. I'll show you that here. This one actually is through the fermentation stage, and I have actually put it into the refrigerator. And so it doesn't have a lot of juice. It doesn't have the weight on it. This one is jalapeno carrot, and it's still fermenting on the counter. And then I love this, and it's so pretty. But I did a red cabbage, and I added onions and garlic to that. Now there's other seasonings I add as well. You don't have to, but I like to. So I'll share some of those with you. You can add any seasonings. You can do basils and all that, but I almost always add celery seed to mine. I like celery seed in it. And you can add fennel seed. You can add coriander seed. And I usually have fennel seed on hand from my fennel in the garden because usually I let it go to seed. I add mustard seeds to it. But this is a real simple way to preserve food. It takes salt and water. Well, water is sometimes a little bit. I try to use the juices that are actually in the cabbage, so I don't add water. But if you have to add a little bit of water, just be sure that you don't add tap water. You don't want any fluoride, chlorine, or anything else that they let go in our water. I use distilled water, and I've drank distilled water for years, and I really like it. And once you get used to the flavor, you don't want any of the other. So, all right, you can kind of see how I'm cutting this, shredding it up here. And what I'm doing here, this is one large head of cabbage, and it should make about 2 quart jars of 2 quart jars of sauerkraut. So I'm going to just finish cutting this up, and it won't take but a minute here. You know, people used to make sauerkraut. In fact, my grandmas did, and they would store it in their cellar. And while I would love to have a cellar, I do not. Don't even have a place for one, and you don't find cellars around much anymore. But they were a great place for keeping your vegetables, your root vegetables, and your fermented vegetables in a cool, dark place. So I actually took a closet that was in our basement, and it stays cool because it's on an outside wall, and I made a place to store things. Now, you just have to, it has to be dry. It cannot be moist. So if you have a moist basement, that would not be a good idea. All right, I'm almost finished with this. I'm going to cut the core out of this and use the rest of it and chop it up. This one that I'm making today, I'm going to make, I'm going to use some dill that I had in the garden. And I'm going to make a dill garlic one, which I'll have to get my garlic cloves out. I forgot those. And I'm going to put about 3 cloves of garlic in this, and some dill sprigs. And the flower heads of the dill. They actually have a really good flavor. Now when you open it up, you won't want to eat the flower heads, but they really have a good, strong flavor. So I like to add those to things, and they look really nice and pretty. Okay, so I'm going to put all of this cabbage in here, and then I'm going to take the dill from the garden, and I'll cut the flower heads, and we'll add those in the jars before we put it in. I'll get this ready. I'm not going to add it to the cabbage yet. I'll show you because we're going to mush the cabbage up. We want the juices to start coming out of it, and so I'll show you how we're going to do that. And it's kind of a violent process, I guess. But alright, so I have my dill here. Cut it and get it ready for the jars. I love the smell of dill. Dill supposedly, I actually have dill essential oil, curbs your appetite. I don't know if it's true or not, but it kind of makes me hungry because I love dill pickles. So I'm just going to cut this dill up so that it can mix in when I'm ready. So, okay, now we're ready for the salt. And you do not want to use iodized salt in your a ferment because it will interfere with the fermentation process. So I'm going to use this, since this makes 2 jars, and I usually add a tablespoon per jar. I'm going to go ahead and just add this salt to it here, but I'm going to add 2 tablespoons of salt to this. I'm going to go ahead and add my seasonings because it's a good way to get them thoroughly mixed in. So I'm going to add celery seed. How to tell you how much I add of that. I add however much I dump in. There's no real amount you have to add. It's whatever you like. I'm going to add my mustard seeds. And this makes the jars really pretty too. And I'm going to add a few coriander seeds to it. So, all right. Okay, now that the salt is in there, it's important for your hands to be really clean because you don't want any contaminants in your bowl, in your cabbage when you put it in your jars. So I take my rings off because rings harbor bacteria, and wash my hands really good. And then we're going to start mixing and mashing the cabbage and mixing in the salt and the seasonings as we go. So I'm going to try to mush this around. If you had a bigger bowl than this, it would be better. I need to get a big stainless steel bowl for this, and I haven't done that, but that would really help. And there's going to be a little process where this is going to have to sit because the salt works on it after we get it all mixed in, and we'll break down the cabbage. It will surprise you how much this cabbage will break down as it sits with the salt on it and we mush it. And we're also going to pound it with the wooden spoon or wooden spatula that I have here. So let's get this all mixed in. And I kind of just turn it, and it's kind of messy. But I really like this. I mean, sauerkraut you can eat just as a side dish, especially when it's like this. It's very different, more flavorful than when you just buy a can of sauerkraut at the store. You can add all these seasonings to it, and it makes it really yummy. And honestly, it stays crispier because this is not heated. What you get at the store most of the time has been heated, so it cooks the cabbage. This way the cabbage is raw, and it increases the vitamin content when you ferment things. Like the vitamin C goes up like 300% when you ferment. So, okay, I've got that pretty mixed in. I can mix it more after a while, but I'm going to go ahead and show you how to pound this out. And then we're going to let it sit for a little bit. And, okay. Alright, so I'm going to take this and I'm going to start mushing it and pounding it. It's just a wooden paddle. I try not to use metal or plastic when possible. I do have it in a plastic bowl, but it's okay for mixing, but never ferment in plastic. So I'm going to pound this out a little bit and get that salt mixing into the cabbage, and the cabbage will start to make juice. You can see that it's already getting to be less in the bowl than it was. It's really working down, but it's gonna mush down a lot more than that. Mush is a technical term, right? Anyway, I hope you try this. It's really not hard, and you can get some cabbage out there right now. Now, honestly, I was having trouble finding organic cabbage for a few days, and I'm like, that's when I got the purple. I could find the purple, and it's really pretty. In fact, I'm going to do some more purple too, but I have a refrigerator downstairs where I can leave these sit and have them for winter. Now, like I said, the ferments will last for a year in your refrigerator or more. And once we get it to the refrigeration stage, you'll want it to sit in there for probably 6 weeks before you eat it. I mean, you can eat it immediately, but it's way more flavorful and can kind of finish out its process in there. So, okay, I've got this pretty mushed down. I'm going to let it sit here for about an hour and then come back to it, and I'll show you what it looks like, and we'll work it out some more. All right, see you in a minute. All right, we're back. This has sat for a while, and I have mushed on it a little bit more. You can see that it's half the size that it was, and the juices are coming out. I don't know if you can see, but there's a lot of juice in the bottom. If you have a cabbage that has sat at the store for a while, there's a good chance that it won't have as much juice as if it's really fresh. You know, like if you picked it from the garden, it'd be really juicy. But this one is gonna do okay, and I bought it from the store. So before I do my last mushing, my technical term of mushing, I'm gonna go ahead and add my dill that is just kind of cut up, fresh from the garden. I'm gonna add that to it so I can mush that in it and get the seasonings running. And about 3 large cloves of garlic is what I put in, but there's no set amount. If you don't like garlic, don't add garlic. The only thing that's essential is the cabbage and the salt. Everything else is optional. So I'm going to mix this around a little bit. And I love the smell of dill. It's awesome. Alright, now I'm going to use my hands, and I'm going to go for the last little bit. I'm going to mix, and I'm going to squeeze those juices out of the cabbage, because I want quite a bit of juice in my jars. Because the cabbage has to stay under the juice. If it gets out of the juice, it can get black mold on it. And I'm going to show you a couple ways to keep it under the juice. But seems to be getting plenty juicy here. So I'm just mushing that, mixing the garlic, mixing the dill in, and all the seasonings. And I've got quite a bit of juice in the bottom here, so I'm probably good. Alright, in the meantime, or before you start, it's good to have your jars really clean now. For fermenting, it's as important to have clean jars as it is in canning. So if you need to sterilize them, run them under really hot water, whatever you need to do, because you don't want any kind of bacteria growing in your jars. So I have 2-quart jars here. I like to use wide mouth ones because it's easier when I'm mushing this down to get my hand in it. So I'm going to scoot this down so you can see better. Here's my 2 jars. And I have a filler. I actually use this for canning and making salsa to fill my jars. But I'm going to put this on here. And I'm going to start mushing the cabbage into the jars. Now, you can fill it and then smash on it, but you're going to find that you're going to fit more in. I actually have this wooden spoon with a wooden handle. And so I'm going to take this and smash it. Each time I put some in, I'm just going to keep mashing it down so that I can fit more in. That serves several purposes. It gets rid of any air. I mean, there will always be some air until you put your liquid in. But it mashes it down. It fits more in the jar. It is an extra mashing for the cabbage. But gets out the extra oxygen and makes more juice. So it'll start making juice here in the jar as well. So I just mash it each time I put some in. And I'm going to get, it makes those seasonings really come out too. The smell and the flavor. We're going to mash that into our jars. I'm just using the handle of a wooden spoon. I mean, they actually make tools for this. I just don't have one, and I'm kind of not a person who likes a lot of gadgets in my kitchen. But and this works for me. But if you want to get one of the tampers that they make, there's ones they make just exactly for doing this, and it mashes everything down in your jar. This works for me. So my family likes sauerkraut. I mean, you know, you can put it on a brat or something too, but it just makes a really nice side dish. And you don't have to have something particular to eat it on. It's great on a Reuben sandwich. So when I get about this much in, actually You know what? I want to put one of these in. Now these are all washed. I have 4 of these. The flowers from my dill. And I'm just going to stick those kind of down on the side. They look really pretty. And they add a lot of flavor to it. So I'm going to put one over here. And then I'll just put the stuff back over it there. When I get down to about this much, then I'm going to start filling my second jar. So I can keep them kind of even, and because I want even with the cabbage and the juice, because I fit quite a lot in there by tamping it down in there. And the cabbage stays pretty crispy. That's why I like to do, I mean I ferment different vegetables, but my favorite is cabbage just because it does stay crispy. Because I don't care for mushy vegetables too much. So I'm going to finish this. I'm going to go ahead and add the dill in here on the sides. It just looks really pretty too, and it's very flavorful. Alright, I got that in. Let me add some more cabbage and smush it down. So one of the next videos I'm going to make is one on salsa. I want to show you guys how to make salsa. That video is going to be coming up. And I've made salsa for years, but I've never made it this way for years. And one of my favorite things is to roast the vegetables in the oven. It gives them a really good roasty flavor, and it makes it so easy. It's not a big mess. I used to dice up all of my tomatoes and onions and everything. I don't do that anymore. I have a much easier way to do it now, and I can make and can a batch of salsa in, I don't know, a couple hours. So, okay, now I've got this in the jars, and now I'm going to start smashing. I don't know if you can see. I'm going to take, and I don't want pieces of cabbage just loose stuck on the jar above the liquid. So I'm going to mash it down with my fingers. That's why I like the wide mouth jars, because you can get your hand in there. I'm going to do this one. And one of them seems to have a little more liquid in it than the other one. But that doesn't matter because I've got liquid in my bowl here I can add to it. Okay. And you always want to add this because that's where your seasonings are hanging out, is in the bottom of the bowl a lot of times, at least the majority of them. So I'm going to add all this in, and then I'll mash it down again. Alright, there's several ways to keep your vegetables down under the liquid. Now if some of your vegetables come above the liquid, it can actually start to mold and turn black. And if you get a piece on there that doesn't look like it's affected the whole ferment, you can actually just open your jar up and remove it. And it won't hurt you at all because it'll be above the liquid. But when I told you that I wanted to save that cabbage leaf, and I went and moved it. That was to keep the ferment underneath the liquid. So we're going to take this cabbage leaf and we're going to tear it. I don't know. This is one of the ways of doing it, to a little piece about like that, about like this. And I'm going to take it and I'm going to put it in here in my jar. And I'm going to press it down kind of around the edges so that it holds the shredded cabbage down under the liquid, so it can't get above that. And it actually works out really well. Now if this cabbage leaf gets a little mold on it, it won't hurt anything. But I've never had one turn moldy. But okay, so I don't know if you can see, but the cabbage leaf is actually holding everything underneath the liquid. So that's one way to do it. Now my favorite way, I have these awesome little hockey puck looking weights. I ordered these on Amazon, and I just be sure everything's mushed down. And these fit, the ones that I have fit in a wide mouth jar, and I just put it in there and mash it down. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is put the lids on, and I'm just going to use regular mason jar lids. They do sell things for fermenting that let the air out one direction, but they don't let any oxygen in. And that is the goal of fermenting. This is going to create a lot of air inside, and we're going to need to release it. So if you want to get the fermentation lids, they work great. I don't, I just use these and I put them on. Now it's important that I'm going to have to burp my jars every day. If you don't, and I don't put the lid on really, really tight, because the airflow is actually going to be coming out of this. So it's not going to hurt anything, but, and it'll start bubbling and producing gases in there. But I'm going to put these lids on and put this, it's best to set it on a plate, because the liquid will increase and it'll start bubbling, and it can bubble over on your counter. So I set this, sorry, you can leave this out on your counter for anywhere from 4 days to 3 weeks, or 4 weeks, or 6 weeks. But the longer you leave it out, the more sour it's going to taste, because it's taken that salt and it's there's a chemical reaction going that's causing the ferment. Now my sister-in-law likes to leave hers out for 4 weeks or so. I actually usually stop about 4 days. I will have a good fermentation in 4 days. Let me see if this one will. I don't know if you can see, but there's actually bubbles in this jar. And when I release it, if I open the top, there, hear it pop? See all the bubbles coming up? It's released gases, and I actually already burped this once today, so it's really doing its thing. And this one is just about ready for me to put in the fridge. Then once you put them in the fridge, you need to let them sit in there for about 6 weeks before you will have the optimal flavors. And it will stop fermenting when you put it in the fridge though. So I don't know, I was glad you could see that bubbling up. But they're so pretty, they're crispy, they're fresh. This is the jalapeno carrots, and you can get really colorful. If you mix green cabbage with purple cabbage, you're gonna end up having a lighter purple, because the purple, there, we got more bubbles on this one. The purple actually fades and makes the green purple, so I just prefer to stick with green in the green jar and purple in the purple jar. But you can mix them. You can add carrots, peppers, all kinds of spices, just about anything you want. So anyway, I will let these sit out on the counter and start fermenting, and you can taste them. If you want to taste them, open the jar up, get a clean spoon, really clean spoon, and dip in there and taste it to see if it's reached the point where you want it, where you like it. And if it is, then go ahead and refrigerate it. But I have determined that I kind of like mine after 4 or 5 days. That's about enough for me, because I just like it to stay crispy, and it has a really good flavor to me after that. So anyway, I hope you will try fermenting something. Get you some stuff going for winter now that cabbages, there's a lot of cabbages now. Get some going, but remember to use organic everything that you put in your jar, because you don't want the chemicals in there. Anyway, thanks for joining me in my kitchen. I hope this blesses you. Until next time, see you later.